I welcome you all to the first V S Arunachalam Memorial Lecture. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all, especially to the family members of Dr. V S Arunachalam, Mrs. Arunachalam, Malvika Arunachalam, to be here. All the well-wishers of Dr. Arunachalam, I can see many of you who have interacted over the many years, worked with you. And then, of course, some of you who are here to listen to the speaker, the eminent speaker, Professor Dr. Raj Reddy. As many of you know, Dr. Arunachalam was scientific advisor to the Raksha Mantri since 1982. And it is interesting, and it will come back in my opening remarks, of that he established the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics in 1986. And it is prior to that that he met our eminent speaker today, Professor Raj Reddy, and we'll get back to that. But as most of you know, and some of you should know, is that Dr. Arunachalam was very strong in terms of the notion of Atmanirbhar Bharat. He's the earliest person who looked at how to develop technologies within India, for India. And post-retirement, when he joined Carnegie Mellon, he spent a lot of his time looking at the role of science and technology in society, and more specifically science and technology for development, especially in countries like India. Returning to India, he established CSTEP and worked on issues related to energy, urban, and telecom. We will see some of that later. And today, CSTEP is about 120 plus employees with 2 offices and working on what we would call the grand challenges of clean energy, clean air for all, and sustainable, secure futures, which is looking at the long-term trajectories associated with India's development and how we would do it sustainably. We also do have an internal challenge, which we call digital transformation. And it is something that we are constantly working on in each of the earlier areas of grand challenges that we talked about, of clean energy, clean air, and sustainable, secure futures, is to use the best digital tools, best digital technologies to help with address some of these challenges. So coming back, it is our honor at CSTEP to initiate this memorial lecture series to help with discuss and talk about the role of science and technology in society. It is our great honor to have Professor Raj Reddy to give the inaugural memorial address, and it is fitting that an eminent person of Professor Reddy's stature do the same, given that he's worked on multiple issues related to IT for development. Before I invite the next speaker, I would like our folks to play a short video that we have put together for this particular memorial lecture. If we can play that.
From the establishment of landmark institutes like IITs and IIMs to ISRO's pioneering space missions, India has consistently harnessed science and technology to address societal challenges and strengthen its global standing. Thanks to these efforts, science and technology have become an integral part of India's policy processes. When we talk about bringing evidence-based solutions to the heart of policy making, Dr. V S Arunachalam's name resonates with all. After his tenure as the scientific advisor to Raksha Mantri, Government of India, Dr. Arunachalam set up the Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy, CSTEP, in 2005, with a vision to bridge the gap between scientific research and policy making to ensure a sustainable, secure and inclusive future. Today, CSTEP continues to honor his legacy through projects aimed at informing policy decisions. Our rooftop solar explorer tool uses aerial surveys to identify solar potential in different cities in India. Aligned with the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, the tool informs policy decisions in 25 states and 120 cities. CSTEP also collaborates with state governments to strengthen the transmission infrastructure and generates evidence for scaling up renewable energy based EV charging to enable true green mobility in Indian cities. Our high resolution emission inventories have helped various cities and states draft scientifically informed clean air action plans. To further explore decarbonization pathways, we are also looking at how hydrogen can reduce emissions in hard to abate sectors such as steel and cement. CSTEP has also created the Sustainable Alternative Futures for India or SAFARI model to help policymakers visualize low carbon development paths by simulating technology and policy interventions. The Climate Risk Assessment Tool, CRAT, a web-based platform developed by CSTEP, applies system thinking to assess climate risks, exposure, and vulnerability across India. Wicked challenges such as climate change not only require collaboration across disciplines but also behavioral change. Through initiatives such as Earth, we bridge the gap between science and art to raise climate awareness and inspire action. Through this lecture, we celebrate Dr. Arunachalam's legacy by connecting important thought leaders in the scientific arena to public policy practitioners. Welcome to the inaugural V S Arunachalam Memorial Lecture, where we honor a visionary leader and look ahead to a future shaped by science, technology, and evidence-based policy making.
Thank you. With that introduction, I would warmly invite Professor G. Rangarajan, the director of ISC, to provide some remarks and introduce our speaker formally. Please.
For me? No, you should not give. On on behalf of IAC, let me welcome all of you to this memorial lecture. Um, I wish we had better weather, but that has, probably prevented some of the people from coming to this lecture. Um, I think it's very topical that Professor Raj Reddy will be talking about AI today. Because the country also is very concerned about it. In fact, the Ministry of Education had established, two committees to look at the impact of AI on education and on the workforce, because especially the latter one is something of great concern to the government, that whether AI would wipe out some of the low-level software jobs and thus impact employment in the country. And so IAC, there was a bunch of directors who are, involved in these committees, and IAC happened to lead both the committees. And so we found that there was both a lot of hype and also unnecessary tension maybe about this topic. So we have given some recommendations. Hopefully the government will consider those recommendations on how to alleviate this issue. But this, I think of, something which many young people I find, especially in the software sectors and other areas, who are very concerned about. And maybe Dr. Raj Reddy can also address some of these issues in his talk. That would be very useful. So with these few words, let me now introduce Professor Raj Reddy. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Raj Reddy. He's a University Professor of Computer Science and Robotics and the Moza, Bint, Nasser Chair in the School of Computer Science at CMU, where he has served as a founding director of the Robotics Institute and as a dean of the School of Computer Science. He served as co-chair of the President Clinton's Information Technology Advisory Committee and has been awarded 13 honorary doctorates. Dr. Reddy is the recipient of the Legion of Honor, Padma Bhushan, Honda Prize, Vannevar Bush Prize, and the 1994 Turing Award, jointly with Edward Feigenbaum, for pioneering the design and construction of large-scale artificial intelligence systems, demonstrating the practical importance and the potential commercial impact of artificial intelligence technology. Professor Raj Reddy.
Thank you. Good evening. It's a privilege for me to have this opportunity to give the first inaugural memorial lecture of Dr. Arunachalam. I've known Dr. Arun for over 40 years, close to 45, and what is very interesting and amazing to me is not only was he a distinguished scientist, but he was also a leader of large teams of researchers, and that leadership ability to get many people to work on complex things is very unique, and Arun was one of the pioneers of Indian research establishment, scientific research establishment. Going back to early interactions with Dr. Arun, we had a workshop on AI in Bengaluru sometime in the early 80s, 82 or 83. And soon after that, DRDO established a Center for AI and Robotics, and that has become a very important part of the DRDO research. And when he took superannuation and decided to come to US, and we were very happy to invite him to Carnegie Mellon, and he came to Carnegie Mellon and spent close to over 10 years, and that was very exciting and interesting time to have him there. And many anecdotes he would tell me is, I'm probably one of the few people who has served 5 prime ministers of India. And so since that time, he has come back and established CSTEP, Center for Science and Technology Policy, which I think is doing very well and proceeding into the future. And they're working on extremely important problems, which the direction for which was set by Dr. Arun. I'm sure we will hear many more things in the future memorial lectures. What I thought I would do is talk about very specific narrow areas of interest to both of us, which is AI, and in particular AI, what is the promise and perils of AI. And the reason I chose this topic is there's a lot of media hype and media disinformation saying the whole world is going to disappear, existential threat, and so on. And I think it is worthwhile for us to consider what might be possible and what might not be, and what to expect from AI in the future. So what I'm going to talk about is probably represents less than 10% of all the different things that are happening and can happen in AI. But this will give you an indication of how we should view AI in the future. Next slide, please. So the main, this is kind of a summary of AI. Basically, AI is primarily to be seen as enhancing the mental capabilities of human race. Anything you use your brain for, AI will be able to enhance what you do. And to me, that is the main definition of AI. Just like engineering as a field enhances the physical capabilities of the human beings. You know, when we want to cross the oceans, we don't grow fins, we build a submarine or a ship or something. And engineering has, over a period of a few hundred years, or maybe even thousands of years since the Roman time, has become a mainstay for enhancing the human physical capabilities. If we view the same from the same perspective, AI and computer science in general is primarily a science devoted to enhancing the physical capability, mental capabilities. So this enhancing the mental capabilities, so-called intelligence amplifiers, can lead to superhuman capabilities. We should not be worried about it, saying if we are able to do things that are 10, 100 times faster or better or something, there's no reason to be worried about it. It just enhances, the thing. And the way I see it is, it will lead us to new dramatic discoveries in every discipline. We are already beginning to see this. For example, those of you who have been following the research from DeepMind on AlphaFold, they're able to advance scientific discoveries in all the various fields using AI as a tool. The human beings are not able to look at all the options that are there. So because we now have computers that are, when I started in 1963, we had a PDP-1 and so on. Now we have 1 billion times more powerful computers in the last 60 years. And that has actually enabled many possibilities, and it'll continue. We will have another billion-fold improvement in computing, 10 to the 9 times 10 to the 9. And that will actually lead to discoveries and inventions that will truly transform our world. So what I'd like to give you is a small set of examples of the kinds of things that we might be able to do. For example, one of the big problems India has is people that cannot read and write, right? At the last numbers I saw are between 30 and 40% of the population can't read any language, including their own mother tongue. And that may be coming down. But the key point to think about is just because you're able to read something the so-called semi-literate population, just because you're able to read something doesn't mean you are literate in the basically. If you can read a newspaper, but you cannot explain what the article says, you may be literate, but you're not able to function at a level that you would expect a literate person to do. And the opportunity in the future is if you give every person in a village who cannot read and write, then they will have, and if you give every person an intelligent assistant, that intelligent assistant, I don't know if you know about ChatGPT, you can actually, you don't have to read, you can talk to it, and you already, if you use Google Gemini Assistant, you can talk to them and it'll give you answers and it will lead you through things and saying, I don't understand this, can you explain it better? And so any human being who can speak and ask questions, and it doesn't have to, even if you don't understand it, you simply say, I don't understand what you're saying, I need more simpler things. This is what we sometimes call just-in-time learning. That is, you need to learn lots of things in life. None of us have enough lifetimes to learn everything that could be learned. So what do? We learn some of it. All of us learned calculus. I had 3 or 4 semesters of calculus, but I may not have used it. But if it turns out, if I had an intelligent assistant and which says, oh, you need to understand calculus or integration, differentiation to solve this problem, I might say, I don't want to learn all of that. You solve it and tell me what the answer is, okay? And this is usually what happens. For example, these days, if you're using a laptop and something is not working, you say, I want to reset my size of the display characters because I'm not able to see. Now it will give you a description saying, go to settings, then open the display parameters, then do this, and then do this, and so on. In the future, when you say, change the display so I can read it, an AI-based assistant will do all those functions that are already given there. So in the future, it's what we call what to how programming. Instead of saying how to do X, Y, and Z, and you have to do it, you simply say what you want to do. That's what this is how human interaction works. When 2 people are working together, I just tell them to go do anything. Not necessarily research. If I'm asking my secretary, saying, please get me Dr. Palki, and I don't say where he is, who he is, what his number is, none of the things, and they know enough to discover what they have to do and then actually execute my request. And that is that's what will happen in the next. That is that all of us will begin to have access to intelligent assistants, which are mainly a smartphone with some apps, right? And these intelligent assistants will be able to execute things that you don't know how to do and you don't want to bother to learn how to do. That is the exciting things about it. There are lots of things we can do or we can learn how to do, and maybe it's not necessary for me to learn all that. And if I have an intelligent assistant, it will be able to do that. So, for example, in literacy divide, the question is, can you learn without a teacher? There is a X prize, learning X prize of $10 million that was given 3 years ago, if you do a Google search. And the X prize was, if I gave a tablet to a child who does not know how to read or write, is only 5 years old, can they learn how to read, write, and do arithmetic at the first grade level? And amazingly, I thought it might take many years. Amazingly, it turned out 2 groups won it 3 years ago. And the trick was very interesting, namely, what they did is, there's a child, they don't know what they don't even know what this tablet is, right? So as soon as you pick it up, the system discovers it's been picked up, and a cartoon shows up and speaks to you and says, speak to me, in Swahili, basically. And so starting from that, the learning X Prize, people that won it, walk you through step by step on how to learn to write, or read, and letters, and do arithmetic, all of those functions. So, so basically, what we in the future will have is the ability to learn without a teacher. This is not something new. Ekalavya learned without a teacher. Srinivas Ramanujan did not have a teacher to teach him all that mathematics. He discovered most of it after seeing a few theorems from S.W. Carr's book, and he was able to expand it and discovered many more things. And so, learning without a teacher, and so we will ultimately go towards personalized education. That is, every person, some people are slow learners, some people are fast learners, and every person is able to learn. There used to be a famous professor, Bloom, Benjamin Bloom. In fact, he came to India in 1950s and advised Nehru on about education systems in India. But anyway, one of the things he's known for is the so-called 2 sigma problem. He discovered, by doing careful experimentation, that if you are able to provide one-on-one education, then people that used to get D's in a conventional classroom will go up. That whole curve, Gaussian curve of distribution of performance, moves up so that now the D students are performing at an A level with one-on-one education, and the A students become A double plus. Everybody kind of moves up on the thing. And he did this study, and when he did the study, this was in 88 or something, everybody said, yeah, it's an interesting result, but we can't afford it. There's no way we can provide one-on-one education. Now, the situation is very different. You can provide one-on-one education with an intelligent assistant, an intelligent tutor, which will kind of lead you through the things at your speed. Some people are slow learners. That doesn't mean you have to give up on them, and they will learn. And if you're a really high IQ, smart learner, fast learner, then you don't have to sit through a whole semester when you can finish the same work in 1 week. So it has benefits for the slow learners and the fast learners. Everyone, kind of has a future options for this thing. So it turns out all of these kinds of things can be studied. What you need to do is to watch what every student is doing and discover what is happening with their learning, and then able to lead them to the next step by talking to them. And if it is a one-on-one education, then that becomes possible. So literacy divide is one of the things that will be significantly reduced or eliminated or what in the future, right? And the next one is language divide. We all have our own language, and we can speak in our language, maybe on one or two other languages. And it turns out the world has at least 100 languages which are spoken by more than 10 million people each. And there are many sparse languages, what we call orphan languages, which are only spoken by a few thousand people, which are dying out, and they number in thousands, 4,000 students. So language technology, again, is something AI will impact in a major way. You will be able to watch any movie, read any book, talk to anyone, anywhere, independent of the language of the producer and consumer. And this will have a dramatic impact. And so, for example, one of the simple examples of this was given is what we call a translating telephone. Supposing you want to talk to somebody, and if what you need is a set of technologies between you and the other person speaking Spanish or something. And so you speak in English or Kannada or whatever. When you speak, your speech goes through your smartphone, and it is digitized already, and it can be recognized. And these days, speech recognition systems are pretty good. And then you have to recognize, translate, and synthesize. And it turns out all of those technologies have been demonstrated in the last 15 years. So if you go to Google and search for Obama speaking Chinese, you will see a short clip of Obama, sounding exactly like him, but speaking in Chinese. Obviously, he doesn't know how to speak Chinese. And when we come to the issues of misuse of such technologies, we'll talk about this again. But so the speech-to-speech translation technology has been demonstrated, and what we need is to move that up the chain from 5 or 10 languages, which is more to 100 languages. And for example, almost all the 14 of the Indian languages are spoken by more than 10 million people. And so you should be able to talk to anyone. You can be talking in Kannada, and I can be talking in Telugu, and we can understand each other. Okay. Next one is we should be able to eliminate lockdowns in pandemics. There's no question, there will be more pandemics in the world in the future. The last major pandemic before the one we just went through was the Spanish flu in 1919 to 1920, and over 50 million people died. This time around, that number is more closer to 10 million. And of the 50 million, India is the largest. 15 million people died in the Spanish flu in India. And that is because the British simply ignored the problem. If some Indians are dying, it's okay. It's not a big deal. And so that's what happened. And so most of the medicines and other things that were needed were all diverted to others. So I think going forward into the future, this is a problem that can be solved in an intelligent way. If you remember this time, Prime Minister Modi arbitrarily decided on March 20th or something of 2020 to shut down the whole country. No cars, no buses, no planes, no gatherings together. And this turned into a major disaster for poor people. If you have a car and you can drive around and you're okay. But if you don't have a car, you're using public transportation, then you're stuck. Not only that, since you can't go to your job, you were laid off. You were kind of fired, and therefore they had no income. So if you may remember, some of the people were walking from Maharashtra somewhere to Bihar along the railway lines, thinking they're safe. They didn't realize trains are running. Not because, even though the people were shut down, trains were running to carry goods, right? Then that's why. So this led to great dislocation and great significantly unfair burden on the poorer part of the population. In the future, if you had an intelligent watch, which you can buy, and they're measuring all the vital statistics of the temperature, heart rate, oxygen level, blood pressure, and all of those things, which you can get these days, then you can actually precisely say, you may have COVID, therefore you should self-quarantine, and then you need a health passport. If you want to get on a bus, you need a watch which will kind of certify you don't have temperature or various other things. Therefore, you can get on a bus. And that type of technology is now possible, basically. It's no different than the fast track that you use when you're driving on the highway, is RFID tags. This is not RFID, it's Wi-Fi or Bluetooth communication. But you can essentially begin to think in terms of a health passport, so that anyone that wants to move about can do so, provided they don't have the basic problem. So, how you actually implement such a solution might look to be very expensive. What I'm saying is, every person should have a watch, smartwatch. And they cost about $100 today. They may cost, in quantities of 1 million or 100 million, they may only cost $10. $10 is still too much. So my answer is, the last COVID, the impact on the GDP of India GDP of India is like about $4 trillion. And about 10 to 15% reduction in the GDP, which is like $400 billion. The cost of providing every person with a watch, smartwatch, is only $140 billion. So it's cheaper for controlling the population. This is understood. The infrastructure, this is what I call digital infrastructure. The society for long ago realized they need infrastructure for water supply, hygiene, and even vaccination, all kinds of things. Society has decided it is in the best interest of the entire society. If you don't vaccinate people, they get sick, they infect other people, the whole thing becomes much more expensive to the society. So, the current view, we need to change the mindset of the leadership of saying everyone will be given a digital watch, and if they're not wearing it, they will be fined. It's like any other you say, that is too much intrusion on my privacy and so on. But you need to think about what happened in 1920 when cars came in. People were driving all over the place and killing, having accidents and killing everyone. So the society decided we have to introduce a driver's license. Now we take it for granted, everybody, if you want to drive a car, you better have a driver's license. It certainly restricts your options, but that's what you have to do to kind of make sure that there are not too many deaths. Basically, globally, even after all the driver's license, there are about 1 million people that die every year. So, okay. So there are other such things. That's what I said. What I'm touching on is a small, to me, these are the more interesting ones that are outside of the scope of things that you read in the newspapers. But there are many others that will happen, including the protein folding problem being solved. So this is the more challenging one, elimination of poverty and hunger. And the idea here is, if people are using intelligent assistants, they will be much more productive. They will be able to do a day's work in an hour. If that is the case, then as a society as a whole, we can do 10 times more wealth creation. The example I want you to think about is agriculture. In the agriculture, the population of the world, 80% or 85% of the population in 1900 were actually involved in agriculture. About 100, 120 years ago, 130 years ago. Now only 4% of the people, 4% are involved in agriculture. And they're producing the thing. It causes some problems. Some of the people that were involved in the agriculture in the old days, over a period of time, they didn't have those jobs. But since it happened slowly, it was not as serious a problem. So anyway, it's what is called a rising tide lifts all boats. If there's 10 times more wealth that's created in the world, then everyone will also benefit. In my village, when I was growing up, most people didn't even have a shirt, maybe half naked, right? Just going around with just that. Now, if you go to my village, everybody has a shirt and sandals, I walked around, for the first 10 years, 15 years of my life without any sandals or chappals, barefoot. It never bothered me, but that's the way it was. So I think what we need to kind of think about is, if we're able to improve the productivity and the total wealth, and we are able to go from $100 trillion global GDP to $1,000 trillion, we can do many things that we cannot even imagine today. And I think this will lead to the elimination of poverty and hunger. And the question is, how will that happen? When will it happen? And that's what we can discuss later. So anyway, this is just a few examples of the kinds of things that will happen as a result of advances in AI and computing. And in some ways, what we're doing in AI today is not that different than what we were doing 30, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. Geoff Hinton, who invented the deep learning, was at Carnegie Mellon in 1980 to 86, 87. That's where he invented, he was even then talking about neural networks. We all said, it won't work, but go ahead and do it anyway. And he stuck with it for 40 years. And what saved him was his ideas were the same, but now he had computers that were a million times faster from 1985 to now. And is this additional computational power that has made it possible. Now people are using deep learning much more computationally expensively. You might have read in the papers that the amount of power consumed purely for running these data centers, AI search engines, is turning out to be a major part of the energy consumption. More than 10% of the, and there are all kinds of other social problems with that. If you haven't read about it, you should go to GDP, ChatGPT, and ask about it. It'll explain. The main thing is the computational power that's needed to do many of the latest AI systems requires computing, this million times more computing, and that in turn requires a lot of energy. And so much so, you might have read in the newspapers, Microsoft is paying $1.6 billion to the owners of the 3 Mile Island. It's been shut down completely, right? Since the accident in 1980s, to restart the 3 Mile Island so that they will have captive energy that they can use for their data centers. Okay. So with any advances in technology, there are new societal issues that come up and that lead to new problems. And I'll go through some of them, but because of the time, I won't spend a lot of time on it. First one is everyone is worrying about we're going to lose lots of jobs, including programming jobs. It will happen, but it'll happen not at the speed that you might think, like it's all, everybody is not going to be unemployed tomorrow, but it might happen over 10, 20, 30 years. That gives enough people time to adjust to it. It is different than unemployment that resulted in government policies like NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, overnight, a lot of people working on automotive industry in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, lost all their jobs because they moved all of them to Mexico. That was not gradual. It was kind of sudden. And so we will have job losses for sure, and we need to create societal mechanisms that will permit us to deal with people. Right now, we already have some mechanisms, like if you are unemployed, you get unemployment insurance. That is not fair, because I was having a good job, and my family was, okay. Suddenly, the government comes and changes the policy, and saying you can have free trade between Mexico and Canada. Now I'm out of a job. When government makes policies, then government or society should also take responsibility for it. So if the jobs are going to go to Mexico, then there has to be some tax. The tax should be enough to cover the jobs of the people. And so we need to create a policy saying if you get unemployed because of a governmental policy, right now what they say is we'll educate you. I don't want to be educated. I don't want to learn new things. I'm 60 years old. I just want to, So you need to kind of say, we will give you the 100% of the salary for the next year, and then gradually it goes down by 5 or 10% over a 10-year period or 20-year period. In the meantime, you have to figure out what you want to do. There's another mechanism thing that has been proposed called UBI, Universal Basic Income. Every man, woman, and child on earth gets $1,000 a month. It turns out you can print money. There's an economic theory which says there's no such thing as deficit. There's a modern monetary theory in economics which says you can print as much money and distribute as much money as long as there's no inflation. And the way you ensure that is there are certain things that cause inflation. The supply and demand, and if you don't have enough goods being produced. So if you want to use the money for luxury goods, you want to buy a new car, then you won't be able to pay for it, right? So one of the things that society has to do is to understand, the economists must understand what are the jobs that are elastic. That is, they can absorb more capacity, like teachers. You can create another 10, 20 times more teachers, and there's enough need for the teachers to teach. Nurses. And so that there are certain jobs that are elastic in that they can absorb more capacity. There are other jobs that don't have that. And so the issue turns out to be, how do we create an economy in which there is no inflation? The reason we are now having this inflation is, in the first 2-3 years, President Biden put in several $1 trillion injected into the society for all kinds of things, including free giveaways to people. And but they wanted to spend money on caviar and chocolates and things, and they may not have that thing, and therefore, the other thing they discovered is people didn't want to work. They said, I'm getting enough money, from the thing, and so there were no people to do the jobs. If there are no people to produce the products that the society wants, then it'll cause inflation because supply and demand imbalance. So it's a very interesting situation. If you give everybody free money and they won't do the work, you need a workforce, and they won't do the work, go to work, and therefore, it turns out, in U.S. restaurants, or I know many restaurants and bars used to serve food. They don't serve anymore. They say, we'll give you, serve your drinks, but no food because we don't have anyone to cook the food. And so anyway, job losses is something that is going to happen. Any advanced technology will in fact change the things, and then what we need is create new societal mechanisms. And society does this. At some point we introduced unemployment insurance because people get unemployed, we wanted to protect them somehow. And we needed driver's licenses. We had a legislation saying if you're going to drive a car, you have to have a license. Same thing will happen here. It'll take 20, 30, 40 years, and all the governments that are meeting now, deciding what it is that they have to do, are actually going through that process. It appears to be that the whole world is falling down, but it is actually the way things have to progress. So the second most interesting one is self-driving cars. It turns out every time there is an Uber with a self-driving taxi has an accident, it's a big hue and cry because it was the machine that did it. It turns out human beings make so many mistakes. I said that human created accidental deaths in US are like 45,000. Globally, it's 1 million people die every year from accidents. And if you had what we call intelligent accident avoiding cruise control, 85% of those deaths can be avoided. So, what I think we need to do is, rather than putting restrictions on self-driving cars, we should say every car that's produced should have self-driving capability. That doesn't mean human beings are not involved. It's what I call human-assisted self-driving. So the self-driving technology occasionally will get confused. Rather than going and having an accident, it can say, I'm sorry, I don't understand the situation. You take over control. Conversely, if 80% of the time, if you're drunk and not paying attention and are going to get into an accident, it will take over control and make sure you don't get into an accident. So that kind of a symbiosis between man and machine is what we should look for, not self-driving. Basic confusion about what they call level 4 self-driving technology, where the car will drive by itself and you don't need any human beings. And that's not necessary. We can have level 2, level 3 self-driving technology, which will be significantly beneficial and also save a lot of money. It turns out the repair bills of human-caused car accidents in the United States alone is $55 billion a year. So we can eliminate 85% of that. Then the amount of savings from this technology will be huge. So that what I'm kind of proposing is, rather than being scared of this technology, which, by the way, we started at CMU in 1984, and we should embrace it and go forward and kind of see what it is that we have. I'm not going through my slides exactly as I have written down. It's like human-assisted autonomous driving. I mentioned that. This is the serious problem. Malicious deepfakes and disinformation. Disinformation causes all kinds of difficulty. You might have read in the papers, it's getting so problematic. Australia recently passed a law saying anyone under age of 16 cannot use social networks. The social networks, because of the speed at which they communicate disinformation, the damage is done before you know it. Again, I think the right solutions will evolve. Here is one thing I've been thinking about. There's nothing God-given about instantaneous access to news. Supposing you delay all news by 24 hours. So you can, not news, not necessarily, but any information that somebody posts, that is especially not a trusted authority, can be delayed by 24 hours, during which time you can decide which of them are malicious, and then further delay them, if necessary, for a week or two before they're made available. That way, if it is personal disinformation, like for example, as I said, now we have technology that I can create someone that looks just like me saying all kinds of bad things about other people or politicians, whatever, which I never said. And that would unnecessarily, cause the deep fakes, and disinformation, cause a lot of grief to people through no fault of their own. Normally this doesn't happen, but when you have malicious actors, like if Russia wants to destabilize the West or United States, they can do that. It's purely because they don't want the other country to be strong. And so what you need to do is have a set of tools to control this the network. So what happens now is, if I post something on X and all my followers of me immediately get access to it. If I'm saying something really bad, and millions of people, for example, my student Kai-Fu Lee has 30 million followers in China. Anything he says immediately becomes God-given truth to everyone. And supposing some hacker gets into his thing and posts something pretending to be Kai-Fu Lee, then the damage is done. Okay. So deepfakes and disinformation, what do you do about it? I think we need some technology controls, like controlling the social networks. And I submit there were no social networks 15 years or 20 years ago, and the world was completely okay. And if we have a new social network in which we are just delaying it by 24 hours, it's not going to be such a restriction on most people. And so what we're now looking for is technological and legal solutions to the problem. most of the people, most of the time, are not affected. For example, I am not even on any social network. I don't look at them at all, mainly because it's a waste of time. But if you're a young person and are curious about what your friends are saying or doing, then it becomes a habit-forming thing where you're watching it all the time. So I think we need both technical, legal, and monetary or solutions for this problem. Here is another one that is very interesting. Weapons, killer weapons. They say with AI, we'll have weapons that will go and kill everybody 10 times faster or something. I don't see that. Basically, the way I see it is we have sensor technology these days, and we should be able to build weapons, intelligent, humane weapons, which if it sees it's going to hit a hospital or it's going to hit a school, it has enough sensing and vision. It can deviate away from there and fall harmlessly in some place. So we should be working on humane weapons. And I wish Dr. Arunachalam was here. We would have had a good discussion. And so India, for example, should say, you guys can work on all these other things. We're going to work on humane weapons. So when somebody wants humane weapons, you come to us. Not only for hospitals and schools and innocent bystanders, but even the soldiers. Supposing you're fighting on the opposite side, you're just someone that has been drafted, a poor 20-year-old. You don't know anything, you're just there. Why should we kill them? We should build weapons that will kind of disable them, and not necessarily destroy them. So I think there are solutions we should be thinking about for the future that are very different than what people say. There are lots of other hazards in AI, social manipulation, social surveillance, financial crisis. And for example, there was a thing called flash crash in 2010, $1 trillion loss in one day in the market, and loss of data privacy. For example, right now, a few industries, Google, Microsoft, and Facebook, and so on, control all the data. They collect the data, they control the data, and they use it for money-making purposes. We have to change the laws of data, saying all data belongs to the person, no matter how it is created, who does it, and so on. And that, there'll be a lot of pushback, because when you have a $1 trillion company or $4 trillion company, these companies have so much power that they can control the lobbies and legislation. So I think we need to have new laws created saying data belongs to the owner. And if you're going to use it, you need his permission. Right now, they ask for permission, saying, right in the middle of you trying to do something, saying, do I have permission to use your camera? Of course you can use my camera, because I want to get something done. But the data that they collect should not become the property of the company. It should become property of me. It is personal data. And one of the things that the AI has done is reflecting human biases. For example, when you're giving loans and other things, human beings, loan officers and so on, have biases, and they, as a result, don't give loans to poor people. And even if it's, and this has led to major hue and cry. And again, there's no simple way to control the data, because data is arbitrarily produced and the human biases are reflected in the learning algorithms. That's the same is in the plagiarism for students, for example. It turns out with using GPTs, I can produce a reasonably respectable looking essay, just copy and paste it, and it would be pretty reasonable. And but it's not produced by me. So the question is, what do you do about it? In the current situation at the universities, what happens is, if you're caught once, you're suspended. If you're caught twice, you're dismissed at CMU. Basically, where you're found to be copying things. In India, there's a little less strict, but in the US, they take this very seriously. And this becomes a problem when you are simply copying something from the internet, especially a well-produced summary from ChatGPT or GPT. There are two issues that come up. One is, we're trying to educate a person, therefore they should do the work, they should learn. The second is, why should I learn? If I have a tool, intelligence assistant, that'll do it, let it do it all the time. I should never don't ask me to do the things. But it turns out, unless we educate every person to be able to effectively use AI tools or intelligent assistants, they won't be able to benefit from the technology. Therefore, they won't be able to do it. So what we need in the future is a major change in the curriculum, educational curriculum, so that starting from kindergarten, the kids are taught how to use GPT and taught how to copy and paste it, except you should be able to further explain it spontaneously if a teacher asks. So there are a whole set of issues there we haven't yet come to grips with on education. What is the role of AI in education? How do we control it? And the problem is, education as we now teach it, as we now demonstrate it, may not be necessary in the future. So it's the same conundrum we had 50 years ago when electronic calculators came in, and they were banishing them, saying you can't use an electronic calculator in your studies, exams, because we want you to learn. Ultimately, people gave up and said, if the calculator will do the multiplication and square root, whatever, why should I bother? Let it do it. But what you need to educate them is what to do when you don't know what to do. That the education in the future has to be in the problem-solving mode when you have issues where if you don't know, you can go and have a dialogue with your assistant saying, hey, I have this problem, what do I do? But at least I need to know how to ask that question and then interpret the answer. And the question is, what education must I have in order to do that? there is a thing called prompting technology in AI, and that's a way of saying how do you ask the right question to an AI assistant, and how do you teach them prompting technology. So at this point, I think I can keep going. I'm going to stop and conclude. So I do want to say one thing. You'll read in the papers of existential threat. The whole world is going to come to an end. The definition of an existential threat is permanent, irreversible collapse of human civilization. That is not going to happen. It's a 1 in a million year event, like an asteroid hitting. And there are things that happen, like if you get in a plane, there's always a possibility of an accident. The plane may crash or get into, and you may die. So you don't stop living or flying just because there's going to be an accident. So new species and post-human species, I don't think it'll happen, ever. Maybe even 1,000 years later. All that, another way of saying it is the human beings will become so much more intelligent, so much more capable, because they have access to these intelligent assistant, enhancing the capabilities. So we can actually imagine a person, just like you and me, having capabilities that are 1,000 times more powerful. Is that a new species? You could call it that, but they may look the same and walk the same, but it would be a new species. So we have to kind of define what we mean by a new species and existential threat. If somebody has 1,000 times more powerful capabilities, then they can take over the world, if the rest of us don't have it. And this is a serious problem. And so we can kind of think about all these things. So basically, the next steps, as I see it, is AI will have profound impact on society and will help enhance the quality of life for everyone on the planet. But we need to take active steps, like educating every person on the planet on how to use the AI tools. And that won't happen overnight. It has to be introduced into the curriculum, and the curriculums are slow to change. So there's a whole set of issues to be dealt. We need to develop AI tools that will lead to improvement of factor of 10. What that means is, it is not, if you take a random person who may be in agriculture, he may be in biochemist or something, whatever it is that they're doing, they need tools to make them do it faster, better, and cheaper. The question is, who produces those tools? Where are they? How does it happen? It doesn't happen from ChatGPT or AI. It has to be deliberately, created as productivity enhancing tools in every field. So if you're going to fund something, so you need to kind of take all the important areas. For each one, the funding has to be saying, can you do whatever you're doing better? Can you do it in 1 hour instead of a whole day? What tools do you need to do that, right? So we need to change the curriculum, entire curriculum of the educational system, so that our future generations can use AI effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. I think you can take a few questions.
Sure.
Absolutely. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. I'll come over. And okay. Anyone else?
Sir, it was a very nice talk. Just one question. You mentioned that over the years, technology is changing and it will improve the quality of life. But over centuries, so many scientists have come and gone, so many technologies. Still, violence is there, people are killing each other, and so on. So, there doesn't seem to be much change in some of the things. Any opinions on that?
Because of the echo, I'm not able to hear clearly. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, so the question is, there has been a lot of scientists in the many hundreds and thousands of years, yet we have violence, we have still a lot of human problems. What is your reflection on that?
We have problems of what?
Of violence. I mean, still there's a lot of violence in society. We're still facing a lot of these problems. Science and technology has not really been able to solve some of these problems.
Basically, technology, people have imagined what the technology might do for violence. If you have seen the movie Minority Report, it's called predictive policing. They invented the term that you are going to commit this crime tomorrow, therefore I'm going to arrest you today. And that kind of predictive policing has been proposed. It might even happen, and it will only happen if technology can predict someone somewhere is going to do bad things. And given that we know that we should be able to do it. This is probably more like the case between countries rather than individuals. If a country is going to do something bad, like they knew Russia was going to invade Ukraine several weeks before it happened because of the mobilization and so on. And what they did was warn everyone and threaten Russia, but Russia didn't care. They went ahead and invaded anyway, and the rest of the world doesn't want to go fight another world war and have their own people dying, so they're letting Ukrainians die, and hopefully it'll all get resolved. But violence as a human I've often thought, why do people become violent? Why do people, do things that most of the rest of us in society would not do? Like buying, going and stealing things. And sometimes there is a societal need. They're hungry, they need to eat something. Other times it may be just greed. So I have no clear answer of how AI might solve the violence problem, but I think is a problem worthy of study.
Thank you. Any other question? Here?
Thank you very much for this wonderful, lucid lecture. I want to know, where does Elon Musk fit into your scheme of things?
Elon Musk?
Yes, Elon Musk. Where does he fit into the scheme of things?
Elon Musk is one of the most brilliant people I know, and unfortunately his temperament and mindset is the worst that can be. And so, basically, when you ask the question, how come he is the richest person in the world? What happened? He created 9 or so industries, 6 to 10, all of which are there, but nobody else wanted to invest money and do it. First was the electric cars. He decided to hell with everybody else's common sense. I'm going to build and sell electric cars. And he was able to, he had enough money, and he was able to raise more money and build an electric car plant, and he had monopoly for 5 years, and that's what led to the thing. Now everyone else realizes that is an important technology. For example, one of the amazing things to me is, if you have an electric car with a large enough battery, in California, you can connect your battery to the grid, and they will kind of pay you for it. So last year, apparently, for the first time, the solar energy from in California exceeded the conventional energy sources. I thought they had solar farms. It was not so. It was the number of electric cars that are there. And there is a company in Denmark which kind of says we should only build cars that will run on solar power, and we should simply have the solar panels on the car whenever you're only driving the car maybe 10% of the time. The rest of the time it should be collecting energy. And so basically they are proposing, if you are interested, I can discover the name of the company. I may have mailed it to you, Dr. Palki. This company simply says we should completely ban fossil fuel. It is now possible to have cars that only use solar and other sources of energy. That would be a fantastic future for India, for example. If all cars that are produced in the future will only run on solar power, then the question is, what happens if there is no sun? The answer is maybe 10% of the time there is no sun. But if there is enough capacity in there, we should be able to do it. Yeah.
Thank you for the lecture, sir. One of the things that was claimed was that rising tides will raise all boats, but as with any kind of resource, there are unsolved accessibility problems, and it is not obvious to me how with the advent of AI these unsolved accessibility problems will get solved. So if you could comment on that.
Yeah. So AI will help us to solve some previously unsolved problems, but it will also create more problems that we have to figure out how to solve. So there's both the good and the bad. Like in science, we are now beginning to see advances through the use of AI, where previously unsolved problems like protein folding has been solved, and the people that helped to create the technology got Nobel Prize last year, right? At the same time, AI is going to create new problems to society, and society has to kind of deal with it. We can banish it. I don't think you can any more than you could have stopped building cars in 1920 because there are going to be 40,000 people dying every year because of cars. So there are things that you can control, and here we have a situation where the problems as they come have to be acknowledged and resolved. The situation is governmental regulation and understanding and solution is not moving as fast as the problems that are arising because of technology. But we'll find an equilibrium. I'm not sure when. In the meantime, there will be these disruptions, and there are some people impacted personally because of the misinformation about them that has led to some people actually committed suicide because something was posted about them on the web. Yeah.
Thank you, Raj. I'll now call upon our chairman, Dr. Dipankar Banerjee, to honor the distinguished speaker.
I don't need to sit. Just the shawl. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thank you. Okay. We're done.
Come, I'll help you.
Thank you very much. First of all of you who are here on this rainy, soggy Bangalore evening, but Jay tells me there are many, many more people online as well. So it's a part of your technology, sir. We touched upon the first meetings between Professor Reddy and Dr. Arunachalam when he was chairman of DRDO. But he writes in his book about when he was in CMU, Professor Reddy walking into his room and talking about wave division multiplexing and laser semiconductors and the optical fibers and the birth of ideas of networking in India. And Balki, Professor Balkrishnan and Rahul Tongya were also deeply involved. And that's a story that probably never be told properly. But I just mention it because I think it created bonds between Professor Reddy and Dr. Arunachalam, which were both personal and professional, but sort of bound together with the gleam in both their eyes of India's future. So we are delighted to have you here to deliver this first Arunachalam Memorial Lecture. I can't think of a better person to be here today for this first lecture. And to tell us about the complexities of our emerging world as well. Professor Rangarajan has provided an umbrella. Thank you very much from me personally, you to be here. I'm truly happy to see Mrs. Arunachalam, Meena, Malavika, Professor Chandrasekharan here as well. And I'm so happy that you could be here at this occasion. A final word of thanks for all the people at CSTEP and Indians of Science who worked together to put together this event and to have us all here today listening to Professor Reddy. May I invite you all for a cup of tea? Thank you very much.